Hey guys, welcome back to The Sensitivity Doctor. Dr. Kelley, your host here. Today I had a great conversation with licensed therapist, coach, and mom of a little boy with autism. Her name is Alyssa Scarano. And we talk all about what it is like being neurodiverse and trying to navigate a world where connection is not always easy, but things like social media and dopamine traps can give us these kind of synthetic versions of collection and validation that we're looking for. How to navigate this, when it's a problem, and when sometimes it's actually helpful. So I think this is a really great conversation, not only if you yourself are neurodiverse, whether it's ADHD, autism, high sensitivity, navigating the aftermath of trauma, but also if you're a parent who has a kiddo who is going through some of these things too, because it can be all too tempting to look for those clicks and likes to get what we think we need when really what we need is other people and other relationships. So I hope you can take a moment to reflect on your own experiences and you enjoy the episode. Well, Alyssa, I'm really excited to talk to you. It's funny because I have people on here that I know for a variety of reasons, and then I also have this opportunity to meet people brand new, which is you. So I want to learn all about you. So if you could maybe start with who you are and what you're excited about talking about, because I know we've got a lot to cover today.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Amelia, for having me. I mean, the minute that I found out about you and your podcast, I was like, I have things to say and I want to be here. I want to contribute to the conversation. It's so important. As we learn more and more about neurodivergence, having these conversations are so important so that we can create a world that really helps everybody feel like they belong, regardless of their differences and their uniqueness. That being said, I am a licensed professional counselor. I'm licensed in a few different states. But really, I do this work because I love helping people. Really, it's so important to me to create a space where people feel like they belong, whether that's in the one-to-one like work that I do or the things that I speak to. And part of that comes from, healing from childhood and rewriting narratives, or even just being more accepting of the narrative that we've developed over time, and helping people come back to themselves and who they truly are at their core, not what the world has told them that they are or should be. And so when it comes to neurodivergence, I mean, this is such an important topic to me. It's very dear to my heart. My son is autistic. And I know I'm highly sensitive emotionally. So, when you don't have people that you can relate to, you can feel like the outsider and the outlier and that something is wrong. And so I want to contribute to this conversation just in so many ways, professionally, clinically, personally. I want people to know that they're not broken. They're not flawed. Yeah. There's so much strength in being neurodivergent. And if we could really step into that, and embrace that. If it starts within, then it will, I believe, exude outward onto others.
Awesome. And you said you're a licensed counselor. Where are you based out of?
So I service clients that are located in Florida, Missouri, New Jersey, and Texas.
Oh, wow. So where are you actually located?
It's a great question. Yeah, I've lived everywhere. And I've gotten licenses in every state that I've lived in, but I'm currently in New York. All of my work is telehealth.
Wait, so did you just mention all the ones except for the place where you are?
Yeah, I know. It's a whole story. So I started grad school. I started my license in New York, and then my husband was in the military, and we got stationed all over.
Okay.
And I never, just never took the test. I finished my hours. I never took the test in New York. And now I'm like years and years in, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to go studying all over again when I'd be doing it. And I'm licensed for many years now. So, so I started in New York, and now I moved back home, and I just never finished the test. I should at some point, but we'll see.
Well, fellow New Yorker here, even though I haven't technically lived there for quite a while, but.
Where are you now?
I'm in the Raleigh-Durham area.
Where is that?
Like North Carolina.
North Carolina. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's one place I've never been, so why I did it.
Oh, okay. I know. It's funny. I think that's my little egocentrism. Like, oh, Raleigh Durham, like everyone knows. But no, it's funny, as you're talking about being able to service clients in different states, sometimes I find it wild that I was talking with a client who's moving and she's moving 30 minutes over the state line. And we're making this whole plan of how she's going to have to come back. It's just like, I don't know. It's a shame that we can't just extend our services everywhere, especially where there being such a shortage and a need. That's really awesome. And I know also, something that intrigued me about, I don't know if it's a main focus of your work or just something that you talk about, but you talk a lot about like validation and these dopamine traps that we can get in. And I feel like there's a way that we could take a special focus on people who are neurodiverse in talking about this today, because I think it's safe to agree that we're in a very different time. And the way that everything is overly accessible impacts our nervous system.
Yes.
I can't help but feel like people who are neurodiverse are probably impacted in an especially different way sometimes too.
Yes.
So I don't know. I'm curious if you could kind of start with that. Like, what do you mean by dopamine traps, and how do you see maybe this manifesting for, you mentioned you're highly sensitive. You said your son is autistic.
Yes.
And then your clients. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, absolutely. So I think, starting with the fact that, we are very visual, but really all of us, right? That, we're so used to immediate gratification. We're so used to external validation, right? We can, with a hit of a button on our phone, we can have something delivered right to our doorstep, whether that's, food right down the street or a package that's halfway across the world, right? We're so used to just having that validation or gratification very, very quickly. And then we are also very appealed by the things that we see, which is why when we walk into a home or we see on social media this beautiful home or something that's just visually very appealing, we're drawn to that, right? And so in that aspect of things, I think at our core as human beings, right, we want to feel like we belong somewhere, like we're seen. And when we look on social media and we see something that resonates, right, it resonates for a reason. There's something about that, okay, it's not just me, right? Now, if you are neurodiverse, right, or highly sensitive emotionally, if you grew up with the world telling you you're different or not good enough, or too much, or there's a space where you're told this, you're being dramatic or you're difficult or, too sensitive. Like in reality, it's more of a matter of I've developed that narrative from maybe not being in the environment where I could be or feel accepted for who I am as I am. And so what happens with this dopamine trap, right, is that we're able to access right with our fingertips at any given moment throughout our day some sort of little micro experience of acceptance of I'm not alone, of okay, it's not just me, right? Whether or not it's somebody liking a picture or responding to something that you've posted, it's validation in that moment. And when we receive validation, it's an aspect of okay, I'm doing it right. That all of that stuff is not true, right? It does something for the nervous system where it can instantly calm us. It sends that dopamine to us. And it can be something that we rely on because maybe that's not something you've experienced prior, right? Or you've experienced a lot of the other side of it, the micro rejection or the sense of I don't really fit. And so I do think it can become a trap until we can self-validate, until we can accept ourselves. And so I think what we're ultimately talking about here is how do I learn to love myself, as I am, who I am, in whatever form, regardless of what my environment is showing me, but also, what is within my environment now that doesn't quite fit? And where can I find that sense of fitting, somewhere else?
I could see that being especially difficult when what you're talking about, like we're just using social media as an example, but it can be a place marker for things like drugs, alcohol, love addiction, all these different things, food, a variety of things that bring us like a very quick hit of comfort.
So.
How would you suggest someone, especially someone who's highly sensitive, or I'm thinking of like I almost say like the trifecta. We've got, high sensitivity, which is not overactive, a more active limbic system. So the amygdala, mirror neurons are more active just in general. So life can feel more intense. So rejection, to your point. I think to a highly sensitive person, it doesn't feel like a micro rejection. It feels like a full rejection. And then I also think of ADHD. So if we're going to extend to the other side of the triangle, and we have shame sensitivity and rejection sensitivity, justice sensitivity, which is a new term that I came across recently, where it's not just someone thinks poorly of me, but it's also that justice in the world can feel very sensitive to people with ADHD. And then I'm curious, for you also having a child with autism, in what ways do you think he experiences this? I almost don't want to speak on his behalf.
Yeah, it's true. I think because these responses from our environment start very young, right? Like, for example, my son he's amazing. Oh, you love him. He, will act out, right? When he's reached his point of just overwhelm, burnout, right? And traditionally speaking, if somebody's not really aware of how his autism manifests, because he is level 1 and he has, all of these strengths, his diagnosis is forgotten or overlooked, or there's even an aspect of he's not autistic, right? So his behavior is seen as him being bad, right? Or attention seeking, when in reality, he's connection seeking, right? And he's not bad.
Good point.
He's struggling with something, or he's overwhelmed, or doesn't have the language in that moment because he's used all of his language up, right? Or he's on empty at this point. He's got nothing left because he's masked for the last 2 hours, right? Which is a lot for a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
So, if the response from over and over from the adults, right, the people that children look up to, is that he's being bad, right? Even if they're not explicitly stating that, kids feel, and I do very much
even a
believe
facial
that.
expression.
Oh, 100%. And I think that when you're highly sensitive, when you're neurodiverse, when you have ADHD or you have autism, you pick up on things that others don't even know that they're putting out. So I think that it's very possible that he'll feel that from adults, right? Especially if what he's already doing is very hard and very taxing for him. And he's pulling from other, internal systems just to, be in the world. He's going to pick up on those things, and that can become part of the narrative. It's a movie, right? So that, like you said, micro rejection is not micro. It's it can become a whole rejection of self, right? If that is continually if that's continually the message that's provided over and over and over again, when you think about it, it's like the world maybe doesn't see him for who he really is, or the world doesn't fit, or the environment doesn't fit who he is or what he means, right? It's the reflection of the environment, not of him. Right. And I think that's one of the key things here, is that we can make a switch from, it's not you, right? You're not flawed or broken. The environment is missing the support that you need, that can really truly reach you and connect with you and show you that you are loved.
And when I hear you, I can feel that. I can feel how your clients probably receive that from you, the people that you support. Not everyone's in that kind of supportive environment and receiving those messages. And I can see those folks being the ones that more readily reach for the dopamine trap you were talking about. How could you speak to those specific people? Like, what is their something that they might be able to recognize in themselves to see, oh, this is what I'm doing. I am reaching for this dopamine trap validation loop to fill these voids. And what can they do instead? And this is not an easy question. I'm fully aware. I'm like, good luck.
Yes. No. And it's not because it's layered, right? And I want to give that space because if it's right, if it's not an easy question to answer, it's because it's not an easy thing to recognize. Like, I want to give that space. So if I give this answer and you're like, listen, you lost me. I totally understand, right? Because I think these dopamine traps in whatever form, whether it is social media, whether it is in spending, or it's in substances or sex or love or any sort of external validation, method that we've used that has been provided us some sort of success, right? If we're looking outside of ourselves for all of these things, it's become so ingrained, right? And natural. And then, if it is social media, which for a lot of us it is, our phones are in our hands. We use it for work. We use them to travel. So the access to that is so readily available.
They wake us up in the morning. They put us to bed at night.
Yes.
Sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. We're on it if we're watching TV. I mean, it's everywhere. So giving that space that like, okay, well, it may not be easy to recognize, right? And I think it's a matter of like, truly, we live in this fast-paced world. I do think it's a matter of slowing down, right? And noticing. And that in and of itself, again, very hard to do. So I want to recognize that. It's not like, oh, 1, 2, 3, problem solved. It's like, no. If there are a few things though that I think can help us recognize. It's like, if you're in a position where maybe you're checking and rechecking things like text messages, or looking for confirmation, right? Like an answer to the question of like, am I crazy? Am I seeing this wrong? Is it me? Right? If that is a narrative that plays often in your mind, and it can be like fixating, or if you're constantly checking your social media feed, right? Or just constantly maybe searching for something to fill in a place of discomfort. I think that is where we can start to recognize, okay, I'm leaning on this for something else, for satisfaction of something else. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about external validation, is like, I'm feeling some sort of way internally, and I'm looking outside of myself to have that feeling go away, or for it to not be true. Right. And so recognizing it can be really through, I think, our behavior first, and slowing down and asking yourself instead, what is it that I truly need in this moment? What's really going on for me? Am I anxious? Am I uncomfortable in this environment? And then validating from there, like, it's okay if I'm anxious. It's okay if I feel this way, and I feel this way because I feel this way, and that's fine. I don't even need more of an explanation than that. I want one, great. Okay, I can ask some follow-up questions, or I can talk to someone else, or take some time to myself to try and sit with it. And instead of judging it, I can get curious with it, make friends with it. What is it trying to tell me about what I need? And how can I give it to myself instead of relying on another person or on this
or device?
Yes.
I can see, based on what you're saying, for people who have the executive functioning, which when we then consider like ADHD or autism, for example, where executive functioning is impacted quite often, that if you have the executive functioning, if you're well rested, if you are well resourced, you could do what you're saying, which is take the moment to be mindful and to check in on the reason behind your behaviors. For many people listening, and even I can think of myself, if I'm really overwhelmed, I can't tell you how many times, now that I think about it, I'll be seeing clients back to back, which is not recommended, but it's just how my schedule works. And I'll have like a 15-minute slice in between clients. And I'm thinking, my one part of myself is thinking, wow, I could maybe do some yoga or meditate or get some notes done. And then the other part of me is like, but don't you want to lay on your purple velvet couch that all your clients get to relax on and scroll through social media? Because that sounds way more fun right now. So, and it's probably because I'm probably oversaturated with people's stress. I'm tired, maybe I'm hungry. And so I don't know, kind of the first instinct is not always to do what you're saying, which is to be mindful and to check in. So I feel like that would be where I would recommend, and I want to know your thoughts on this. Sometimes we need to cut off the source. Like sometimes we do need an externalized factor outside of our control, whether that be putting timers on your phone, whether that be putting a dock station that's far away from you, whether that be something as simple as research has shown that facing your phone down rather than up increases compassion in conversations. Like all of these little tricks to cut off the source, because decision fatigue, we can only handle saying no so many times until we eventually say, you know what? I'm going to pick that phone up again and look at how many people hearted my family vacation on Facebook or something. So what would you say to people who are struggling maybe with this executive functioning piece that you would recommend would help increase their mindfulness so they could do what you're recommending?
Yeah, no, and that's a great clarification because I think it's hard to be mindful, especially when, we're just going about our lives or we're engaging with these things that do work, right? That make us feel better. So I don't think it's necessary.
Yes, they do work.
Right. No. And so I don't I think at first it's a matter of recognizing there's a pattern here, right? Like this is something that I'm often finding myself saying or doing. And the effects of it maybe are X, Y, or Z, or it's not working anymore, or I feel like I'm needing a lot of it. Like I think it's more of an awareness that kind of builds. But then your question is like, well, how do I kind of set myself up for success, right? And so, yeah, it may be, and I think it depends on the person. I want to be clear about that, right? If you're someone who is very visual, right? Like perhaps, and needs a lot of structure or routine, perhaps like really depending on what your workday looks like, if you are somebody who uses your calendar already, right, or to-do lists or tasks, like it may be a matter of writing it down, like when are my structured times that I'm going to give myself a break and allow myself to do this, and is it a matter of like setting a timer, I'm gonna give myself 15 minutes, yes, to do this thing, or to even just do something else that actually is going to fill up my tank, because perhaps that old like external validation tool that I've been using really isn't cutting it anymore. And that's why I'm getting stuck in it. Like I'm just scrolling or I'm, because that's the other thing is that, I mean, if we look at like substance use, right? If you're, for an example, if you're looking, if you're using substances as a way to cope, let's just say, right? What happens is like eventually I'm going to need more of it, right?
Right, so your tolerance.
Where tolerance goes up. So it's a matter of, I think in those instances, is that method still working? Am I needing more of that? And yet I'm still feeling like it's not enough or it's just not doing it anymore. What else can I do instead? So if you're someone who's visual, sure, like give yourself that time. Maybe then also time yourself, set a timer. But where can I also introduce other ways of validating myself, of accepting myself?
Yeah. I love that because, well, and one thing when you were saying about if you're a visual person and if you find yourself needing more, I could almost see in relation to our conversation about getting like rapid feedback through social media, that when you go to your social media and you don't see the little red bubble with a number in it and like no one has responded since you last checked, and you get that like disappointing kind of gut, like, oh, man, to me, that would be a sign that your tolerance is growing beyond what the actual output of social media has to offer you. That would be, I think, something that people could pay attention to. When you're talking about external validation and going to social media for connection and gratification, I wonder what you think about are we manufacturing what, and I'm going to get really historic here, I guess, but are we kind of manufacturing what we spiritually, physically, psychologically need, which is people and community? Because if we look at the science, even our DNA changes for the good when we're around people. So are we getting that same gratification from social media, or do you think there's kind of like a gap here where maybe the validation, and this is tricky because I don't know if I love the idea of getting validation from others, but I don't know. What's your take on taking this to like how to socialize and how to put yourself out there for different forms of it?
Yeah. In my opinion, right, and I think everybody will vary here, but I do think that it serves to connect us, right? Like I do think that. I think that's the purpose of all of it, right? Like all of these social media platforms, or that same name, that's allowed, but all these social media platforms were created with the purpose of connecting us to one another. That's what technology allows us to do. It's what virtual therapy allowed us to do. And so, yes, perhaps it does, but I do think it's like anything else, anything in excess can, where now it's so much incorporated into our day, into our mood, and it's seeped in many different facets of how we live and function. That's where it can become a problem, right? If that's where now we're relying on it, and what are the rest of our relationships in our life? What do they look like? Where are they, right? How validated do I feel in those relationships? And perhaps that the answer to that is like, I don't really feel that validation with people that I surround myself with. Well, that's a pretty good indication that maybe I like find some new people, right? Or some new things, or develop some ways that I can validate myself instead. So I think it's created for that, but I think it can, because it's so readily available, we can tend to rely on it to the point where, yeah, it's a need and it's not necessarily working anymore.
I could see that going back to my example of hanging on my velvet couch looking at social media in between clients. I feel physically different after I do that. I almost feel more tired versus if one of my coworkers pops in to ask me a question and we start talking about something random. I don't even know if I'm talking about validation anymore, probably more what you were saying of like connection. Do you know anything about like why there would be a difference between the two?
Well, I don't think, like, when your coworker comes in, right, and talks to you, it's reciprocal.
Good point.
No,
We would hope.
yeah. Whereas, like, we're on our phone and we're just scrolling, and it's all very quick, right? Even if we watch a reel, or those videos are like what, 30, 45 seconds. And it's someone talking or showing you their world, which is great and nice. And connecting, we're meant to serve for connection, but it's not reciprocal. It's not that person on the phone saying like, hey, show me your office space, right? Where you're now seen and truly heard. You're just seeing into someone else's world, which is great, but they're still not walking away from it. Like, what about me, right? And in that, and we can even take that a little deeper, truly.
Yeah, please.
You see me getting excited.
I'm all about it.
In that, it's like, in those moments, truly though, where a conversation, maybe even one-on-one or in a group, or like an interaction on social media, which is one-sided, that part of you that is not seen still, right, is maybe, yes, what about me? I feel so unseen here in this space. It just depleted me. That makes sense. So there's like a little bit of like self-abandonment in that little instance of time, whether it is 15 minutes or 5 minutes. There's part of you that's seeking connection, right? And wanting to be heard and seen and validated. And I'm relying on it for this thing that can't even get tapped back to me and look me in the eye.
So that makes me wonder, do you think there's a difference between, say, this kind of one-sided validation loop that you're talking about, where you're just looking at people? I mean, I guess technically they're giving you feedback by giving you likes or hearts or whatever, but versus, say, like I run an ADHD support group every other week on Zoom. I love it. It's really fun. And I feel excited and invigorated. Like I feel positive. I feel the way, maybe not, well, yeah, probably similar to how I feel when my coworker walks in my room and we have good conversation and then they leave. I feel that same, I might even feel more level of like energy after that group versus if I'm watching other people's social media. Okay, this is a two-part question. One, do you think there's positives, right? That's really what I'm setting up here. Do you think there can be some positives with this, especially in certain platforms? And two, do you think any of this has to do with when we are stuck in the validation dopamine trap loop? We're also really highly engaged in comparison.
Oh, yeah.
Because we haven't even brought up comparison. And I feel like that's a big part of social media because you're scrolling and you're like, oh, I got 22 likes and this person got 52 likes. Or I just landed this book deal and this person's meeting Oprah or whatever. You're all inside my head now. So I don't know which direction you want to go first. I mean, maybe we'll finish up the conversation about the positives and the negatives, and we can come back to comparison. Do you see any positives with this?
I do, right? And I actually want to use a different example to show why. But
Yeah, go for
let me
it.
introduce it first. So I do think there are positives, right? Because it's a step. It's a step towards connection, right? It's a step of like, oh, I do that too. Or I feel the same way. Or wow, I have that same shirt in whatever form, right? So if we kind of externalize that to something that is virtual, right? Like say that you're taking, this is so funny because I'm like, oh, I do virtual therapy. Say that you're taking a virtual like gym class, right? Or you're listening to an exercise instructor giving you guidance on like how to do the exercise. Sure, that's bringing you into maybe doing the exercise or participating physically in the class, like a virtual yoga class. But now let's say we actually compare that to the live in-person community class. There's a completely different energy when you have someone next to you doing an exercise and versus when you're alone doing the exercise, just listening to it. Right? Because there's an aspect of like community. I'm not alone in this. Maybe there's, even if there's still comparison showing up in that moment because we all have our stuff, like, you know, the leaps about our bottoms, our abilities, and this is exercise, of course. But there's still an aspect of like, okay, you're in this too. Perhaps we've like shared glances of like, why did I sign up for this? I have the instructor making eye contact with me, or I can ask for help, or I can ask a clarifying question. It's like we're all in that together. Right? There's a sense of connection to the space, to the thing that you're doing, right? Versus, you know, just taking it on your own. I mean, think about those who work from home as well. Like, yeah, we've got the benefit of like, I work in my pajamas, or I can go right in the next room, or I can have this on, have that on. But if there isn't some sort of connecting element, it can feel very isolating and you can feel very disconnected from your team. So I think, very long-windedly to answer your question, I do feel like there are positives in the sense of it's a step toward connection. But when it starts to be the only form of connection, yes, that is where now there's a sense of lack. There's a sense of, that's where comparison can come up, right? Or emptiness and depletion can come up because there's that sense of I'm not seeing, or what's the point, you know?
I can really see when I think about how this applies to neurodiverse individuals, how both of the things you're saying would really apply for the positive, actually for positives on both sides. So how the step towards connection, because we know, let's say we take the three types of neurodiverses that I mentioned, which I think that we are, it's hard to say anyone will go through their life without experiencing some form of neurodiversity at some point, whether it be a medical trauma or hormonal shifts or pregnancy or TBI or just in general. But we're talking about the three kind of biologically based neurodiversities. Let's take HSPs. they can become emotionally flooded and overwhelmed and drained, and they need, on average, 2 hours of alone time per day unstructured. But they really want to get better at piano. I'll use piano, for example, because it's something I care about. For them, it might feel less draining to jump on a virtual class than it would be to leave their home, to get everything together, to get out the door and get to the space. Likewise, ADHD, I could see with the executive functioning of time pressure and time blindness, being able to fit all the things into your day, it might be helpful for you to do the virtual piano class because, okay, I can squeeze 30 minutes in between my loads of laundry that are, creating a tower and the other things I've committed to. And then also, likewise, with autism, kind of similar in the vein of the HSP, I could see where maybe they really have a special interest in something like piano, but they feel overwhelmed when they're around other people in general. It makes them feel more anxious about doing it. Maybe the virtual lesson is helpful in that way. So I could see how it can be very positive to help with neurodiversity in those ways. I'm curious, the other thing you had mentioned about being in person, I do want to just mention really quickly, the science supports it too. Because if we look at research on meditation, there is actual positive energy that emits from the human body when meditating in a massive group. So likewise, our vagus nerve, like everything we can co-regulate in a totally different way when we're in person.
Yeah.
But luckily, vocal tone, facial expression is a big part of it. So that's why virtual therapy is so powerful. But I'm glad that there are some positives, especially for neurodiversity.
Yeah. Right. And then I think it kind of, if we're being inclusive, right, I think ultimately it's not a matter to say that like one is better or worse or right or wrong. I think it's a matter of where are you at today? What do you need today, right now, right? Like, it's great to have the option of like, yeah, I could go to the class live, right? Or I could, you know what, right now I'm drained. I've reached my limit. I'm burnt out, but my body's craving a movement. Like, yeah, maybe I participate virtually, right? And maybe not. Like maybe you're like, but I really like this class when I go in person. Okay, so maybe I'm not as quiet and loud that day. And maybe I'm not as like, I'm just kind of quiet and to myself that day. That's okay, right? And I think that's where it's a matter of thinking about like making a shift from right or wrong, right? Reframing neurodivergence in general of it's not a flaw, right?
Right.
It's more a matter of like, I do best in these environments with these supports, with these options. And that's okay. It's not bad, wrong, like this isn't a positive or a negative. It's a matter of like having a balance to it all, and if on that day you're burnt out, sure, you do it at home or do something else. Like, it's okay.
No, I like what you're saying because it really looks at these things as props to enhance someone's life as opposed to these things to modify and change who we are. That's not, you're not going to cope your way out of autism or relax your way out of being highly sensitive or organize your way out of ADHD. Like there are skills that prop up and that help what is already happening. So I love that idea of like seeing it in that way. And I'm curious the comparison piece though. When you think about people who are neurodiverse in the ways that we're talking about today, and maybe someone listening who isn't even, but just feels like this conversation applies to them, why do you think we get so fixated on comparison? And do you think there is like a way to spin comparison to be helpful, maybe almost motivating?
I'm stuck on the second part because I'm thinking about, could it be motivating? So I think to answer the first part of the question, right, in terms of comparison, it can come from a place of lack. Someone else has this thing and I don't, right? And that's the trap of like right versus wrong, bad versus good. When life is just not black and white like that. It's just not. Like, neurodiversity in general, humans in general, we all operate differently, have different stories, have different strengths and abilities. So, I mean, that's as long as we're taking that and kind of calling it for what it is like, that's where we're getting into the trap of like good versus bad, right versus wrong. Now, in terms of, you know, how it could be potentially motivating, I think if it's a matter of like, okay, I don't have that yet, you know, that's something that I want, right? And I'm not coming from a limiting, lacking belief of like, I'll never have that. But more of a matter if like this person did it, perhaps I can do it too, right? Maybe I can ask them about their journey, or you know, how did you make that happen, or you know, you are inspiring me. But you're making that shift from like, I don't have that and I never will, you know, or lack versus it's just maybe it's not within my reach yet, but I can have something like that, right? So
Right.
does that answer the
Oh,
question?
yeah. I mean, it sounds like what you're talking about is the difference between like a scarcity mindset versus a more growth mindset. This is like steps towards that desired thing. And also not perfectly the same. I think I was selfishly asking that because that's something I've done personally. If I find myself getting into comparisons, I'll ask myself, you know, do I want to feel icky about this? Do I want to keep exposing myself to this? Or is there something about this person's journey or what they've done that truly, like, authentically matches with something I want?
Yes.
And if it does, I love what you said about asking the questions, being vulnerable, you know, who's your producer or where did you get that idea or what training did you do? Like putting ourselves out there and asking, which is interesting because I think it brings us full circle to the whole crux of this conversation that if the only reason you're getting on social media and you're diving into the validation loop is to stay in it alone without involving and engaging and talking with other people, it's kind of like vapid dopamine. It does the job for a little while. You grow your tolerance. You need more and more.
Right.
But it sounds like what we've been talking about today is that if you recognize it and you pull yourself a little bit out of the loop and you start talking with people or asking questions or getting out every once in a while and like you said, giving the side eye, what are we doing in this class? Like engaging a little bit more in addition. I mean, social media doesn't have to be the big bad wolf. It can instead be a way to connect.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, I think if we try, I mean, because we're talking about this in so many different layers, and which is so great because it's like clearly there's so much to talk about here, and there's no one way of thinking about things, right? And I think when we are on the internet or in our homes and by ourselves, right, we're in our own echo chamber of whatever it is that's been rolling around in our mind for days, hours, weeks, months, years, right? And so, yeah, when we think about what basic human needs are, it is safety, warmth, food. It's also belonging. That is a
Yes,
basic human need, no
it is.
matter, you know, whether you're neurotypical, neurodiverse, or whoever you are in the world, it is a human need, right? And then think about like even like COVID, and it was a very isolating time for all of us in some way, shape, or form. And it was very hard for many, 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 many peoples. And so it is a basic human need, even if it's hard to connect, even if your tolerance for connection looks different, right? I think at the core, it is a basic human need for all of us. And sometimes there's an aspect of feeling like, I don't know how to connect, or I don't know how, or I haven't been able to, right? That becomes the echo chamber. That becomes the belief system, perhaps because the environment never truly fit my needs or my support.
Right.
But if I step outside of it, even just a little bit, outside of my echo chamber, and I do something different, right? And I validate myself, like, of course, yes, this is hard, and it's okay, right? And it doesn't have to look right, or that, you know, it's only other people get it right. No, what's right for me? What fits for me? You know?
Yeah, and I like what you're saying too, because I think that's when I've seen a lot of healing for people, the neurodiverse folks, and even just people who I see trauma in a similar vein sometimes, where it can be scary to put yourself out there and feel safe in social environments. You can get overwhelmed and flooded quite often in those environments. I mean, heck, even being a new mom, you can feel that way, I'm sure. And also during the beginning part of the pandemic, you said your son is 4?
He's gonna be 5, yeah.
Oh, he's gonna be 5. Okay, yeah. So we both had COVID babies, and so it's very different. I sometimes joke, it's a terrible joke, but it's how I coped. I think I sometimes said that the whole world went on maternity leave with me. So
Yeah.
that's how it felt. I mean, it was wild, but in a way, what I'm really loving about the conversation today is recognizing that if you are someone who's neurodiverse or feels othered in any way, it can be a slippery slope and very tempting to reach for something like social media, for example, as a quick way to feel validated and like you belong. And while there's nothing wrong necessarily with it, it may not lead you to what you're actually looking for and needing. And if it doesn't feel comfortable putting yourself just boldly out there holistically, I'll encourage folks like that, find your people. Like I have a lot of highly sensitive people I work with who have a hard time connecting with people. And sometimes I'll say, "Do you have HSP friends?" Like maybe you need other people who love having deep philosophical conversation as
Right.
opposed to small talk. Like finding people that match your energy. And even sometimes if you notice your neurodiversity, that can be helpful too.
Right.
So, but I can ask you a million more questions, but we got to wrap up for our wonderful chat. So if I could ask you one last question, and then also where people can, stay connected and learn more about you and your work. When you think about, you had brought up your son in the beginning. When you think about how his journey is going to be in belonging as he gets older, what are your biggest wishes for him or other kids who are like him when they feel the temptation to reach for the quickest form of validation? What would you want to say to them to try and do today?
No, it's a great question. We're not there yet because he's only 5. I mean, I guess we could be, but I haven't had to think about it yet. We're still working on other
We can
things.
envision other kiddos too, maybe
Wow.
ones you work with.
Let's see. So, in terms of reaching for something outside of myself,
And feel free to take your time. Camille, you can like edit this and pare this out so she can have time to think. That's my producer.
I mean, I would hope that it could be a matter of curiosity. Why is it that I'm reaching for this thing outside of myself? What is it that maybe I'm looking for that I don't have in this moment? And how can I give it to myself? That's my hope. And I think with if we're able to embrace individuals who are neurodiverse, right, with acceptance, right, in terms of the things that make you who you are strengths, and I hate to be maybe cliche, and I'm sure not everybody likes this, but if we embrace those things about ourselves that make us different, right, those are our superpowers, as opposed to it being flaw, right? The message was that I was bad or wrong or different and not good enough, but ultimately, I pick up on things that the rest of the world doesn't. How special that is, and how can I use
Absolutely.
that? How can I use that to find purpose and meaning and connection? So that maybe, I feel less alone. And maybe it means that I have to be a little more selective over what I do and who I spend my time with. And so that is a hope, that there's a little bit of curiosity pause, and before I'm reaching for something that I hope is going to make me feel better, and whatever that is. And what is it that I need in me searching for this? And how can I give that to myself in some other way that's going to feel more gratifying?
Awesome. Well, I hope that as well for everyone listening, that they can just, remain curious and compassionate with themselves. And if they want to stay connected and keep learning about the things you're putting out into the world, where can they find you?
The best place to find us is on our website. We do have social media, but we're really not that active on it. The best place to find us is our website. And so it's www.collective-therapy.com. So it's collective-therapy.com.
And is it you, or do you have a collection of folks that are with you, or?
I do have staff. I have people in Texas. I have people in Jersey, out in New York. So we've got staff here, and everybody accepts insurance as well. So we're a whole collective of providers. So if you're interested, if you want to find out more, feel free to reach back out. I would love to connect with anybody who has questions. We're here.
Great.
Come find us.
Well, thank you so much, Alyssa, for coming on. And I hope everyone takes some time to maybe turn their phones off and go connect with other people. Be well, everyone.